So far, my partner has mentioned a couple of reasons why capital punishment should be kept. First, he explained how keeping them in prison for life is impractical since people in jail are put there to learn the lesson. He also mentions how you deserve a just punishment that befits the crime. Mr. Hernandez responded to him by speaking how the cycle of the violence mentality doesn't solve anything. I'd like to say that this is an issue because of something called the 3 strikes law that I will mention momentarily. He also talked about Stan Williams, who gained a lot of sympathy from citizens after he wrote a couple of books and showed he was regretful for his actions. I have a statistic here that shows that this is really an anomaly case. It's a poll conducted by the Gallup polls that show that since 1991, from 60 to 80% of people favor having capital punishment. Stan Williams might have been apologetic, but he still killed those 4 people. He deserves a just punishment for his actions. And I'm not even considering that, but he was the leader of a notorious street gang, so I don't know if he just killed 4 people. Now moving on to some workability arguments resulting from removing capital punishment. First off, if the killer is jailed for life, well, the only thing they're risking him or her is escaping prison, which puts everyone in danger. Killing them is a form of retribution or relief for the victim's family, because I'm sure the family is very restless knowing the killer might always have the opportunity to escape. Second, if we remove capital punishment and set life in jail as the limit of punishments available, then it really becomes unfair for one specific reason. Well, there's a law called the 3 strikes law that basically says that if a person commits the same crime 3 times, you are sentenced to jail for at least a minimum of 25 years. And here are the crimes you have to commit in California to be considered for capital punishment. And they go as follows. It's a first-degree murder with special circumstances like sabotage, train breaking causing death, treason, perjury causing execution of an innocent person, fatal assault by a prisoner serving a life sentence. The 3 strikes law doesn't have to be this severe. Simply commit the same crime 3 times and you're put in jail for a really long time. And it's not only this law, it's just think of habitual criminals. I have a specific case to prove my point that there's a limit, that setting a limit to punishment is not a good idea. It's a story of a man named Kevin Holder that I pulled down from KETV.com, which is a news organization in Omaha. Kevin Holder was a known criminal to the police in the area, and he had a really, really long record of crimes. His crimes ranged from robbery to drugs and sometimes resisting arrest. But murder, however, was never one of those crimes. And what punishment did he get? It wasn't death, well, that's for sure. Although he is getting a lot of years. But why did he not get death? Because he never killed anyone, and most of his crimes aren't really serious. Now, how does someone going on a killing spree look when you compare to my previous example? Do you think these 2 people belong in the same jail? I don't. The moral of this is that a murderer deserves a harsher punishment. Now, my third reason is similar to my partner's. So, a criminal will always be known as a criminal. Keeping them in jail for life is pointless. My partner stated that if they stay in prison for the rest of their lives, it defeats the purpose of the prison itself. There's a statistic that I have that comes from the U.S. Department of Justice that says that 65.5% of prisoners sentenced to death had a prior conviction. And I also have this amazing fact that I got from procapitalpunishment.com that says that 775 killers who were executed between 1998 and 2008 had murdered at least 1,591 people. And that's an average of 2 victims per executed killing. There is an issue with trying to remove the capital punishment. U.S. Attorney General D. Lowell Jensen told the Senate subcommittee that it is impossible to punish or even deter such prison murderers because without a death sentence, a violent life termer has free rein to continue to murder as opportunity and his perverse motives dictate. There have been cases where murderers have been released, which were released in the first place because of the insufficient evidence to prove them guilty. But what happens is that they were released, and in a couple of years, they were back in jail for another crime. Now, a case of a man, Robert Lee Massey, was sentenced to death, but was overturned, and he was released. I'll quote the summary that explains it, and it's from a website called clarkprosecutor.org. And it says, Massey pled guilty to 3 separate robberies committed on January 7, 1965. In each case, he's shooting the victim as he left. Mildred West was robbed and killed in her front yard. He was sentenced to death in 1965, but the sentence was commuted to life by Furman in 1972. And Masu was paroled in 1978, and he murdered a liquor store owner during armed robbery 8 months later. He pled guilty and was again sentenced to death. He objected to an appeal, but the California courts required one. The sentence was reversed by the Rose-Byrd California Supreme Court because his lawyer did not consent to guilty plea. He was found guilty and sentenced to death again in 1989, and eventually waived his final appeals, and he was executed in March 2001. So you can see that he was in fact guilty in the first place, but another murder had to happen to prove this. There's also the risk of them attacking a guard in jail. And I have another article that a man named Henry Brisbane that I got from Time Magazine. And when they interviewed him, he himself said, "I was taught to be a racist and not like whites. As I grew up, I decided I didn't like nobody." Henry Brisbane was arrested for stopping 2 cars on the interstate and killing the people inside for no reason whatsoever. He was placed in jail first, and while in jail, he killed the guard and started over 15 riots. And after that murder, he was placed on death row. In summary, I would like to state that there are multiple disadvantages to remaining capital punishment, which include, but are not limited to, the victim's family or whoever the murder shot won't be happy knowing the killer is still alive and at risk of escaping. And second, the 3 strikes law would look silly when you set a limit on punishment. And the third, that the serial killer will always be known as the serial killer, so that is the solution.